would say that between 40 and 60% of the success of an organization is revolving around investing in my team. And the other portion of that is around recruiting the right members to then fill seats on that team. Those are my two biggest priorities as a CEO of a company and as a material investor in this company. It is so important. Take the time to be willing to mentor those people who are below you, and take the time to ask people who are above you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another interesting episode of the Curious Tycoon Podcast. This is where we sit down with business leaders who are not just chasing numbers, but shaping industries. Today's guest is a powerhouse of executive leadership and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Christopher Swink. Hello, Christopher. How are you doing today?
Great, Chucks. Thanks for having me, man.
It's a real pleasure to have you on here. What part of the world are you joining us from today?
So I'm from a little town currently in central Illinois called Effingham, Illinois, and it's at the crossroads of Interstate 57 and 70 in the middle of the United States.
I like to call America the greatest country in the world, not because of the population, not because of the military might, not because of technology or whatever, but because of the marketing of America. I think if there's one country that markets themselves the best way possible, I think is America. So what makes you proud to be American?
You know, there's a lot of things that makes me proud to be an American. I'm proud of being able to get up in the morning and to have the freedoms that we're guaranteed here in our Constitution. I'm proud of the ability to pursue my religious desires free of significant concerns of harm.
Yeah.
I'm proud of just the many things that the United States over the years has stood for. Now, granted, we're a really young country, right? In the whole scheme of things, we're extremely young comparative to Asia or even to most of Europe. But super grateful for what we've done so far. I think we'll continue to see some evolution. But I'm also really proud of just the capitalism that exists in the United States. And I'm a perfect example of that, where somebody can come from nothing and just have amazing opportunities. And the success that's allowed for the average person is unbelievable in the United States.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And I can't wait really to be a part of that sometime. You know, my partner is American. And so that's good. That's great. Well, let's get into some of the topics here then. Let's start with some icebreakers. That's usually what I like to start with, you know.
Okay.
You've been a CFO, you've been a COO, you've been a CEO, you're a professor, and now you're a podcaster as well. Which role stretched you the most, and which role brought you the most joy doing?
So my career has been a windy road, right? And as I originally started to answer this question, I picked one, and it was the president and COO role. But then I started to think about it further, and I also subsequently transacted the business to private equity and became this president and CEO with having new shareholders that I didn't have the comfort of being, you know, I'm still one of the shareholders, but I'm not the majority shareholder here. And so that changed really outside my comfort zones. You know, it's one thing to be accountable for financials and operations and culture and vision, but really I think what stresses me out the most today is not only do I have a lot of stakeholders from customers and from stockholders and the like, but it's really the ultimate responsibility of people's livelihoods and their opportunity to grow and to have some of the same opportunities that I've had of just an insane amount of success. And so, you know, as I sit across from leaders that I admire and unpack their stories and connect with them on the podcasting side, that's probably what brings me the most joy.
Yeah. Honestly, podcasting is good. It's great. Awesome. Yeah, you know, hopefully we're gonna sort of dive deeper into some of those areas that you have experience in. But another icebreaker from me before we get into your leadership and your strategy. So there are so many sports in America, right? You guys have baseball, basketball, football, the one you call soccer, and of course your American football, amongst others, really hockey. Let's look at leadership now. If leadership were a sport, which one best represents your style and why?
So I promise I didn't pick this because I like to play, but I picked golf. And the reason that I picked golf is because, on the surface, it's an individual sport, right?
Yeah.
But without a coach and a caddy and trainers, you need those people to reach excellence. So I think for the shallow focus, it's like, oh, that's a leader, an individual sport, not very exciting. But from a leadership perspective, when you really dig into it, in order to be really good, you've got to have a whole team around you. And I think that's very similar to what we do in the business world to be successful. Yeah. There's so many people that have this perspective that you're successful because of you. And that is so wrong. It's because of the team of people that you put around you. Every day I try to hire somebody that has skills that complement my skills, that are outside of my comfort zone. I want them to be able to make decisions, on our behalf that are relevant to their experience, and it doesn't have to be about me all the time.
Yeah, no, that is amazing, Chris. Because I've had, I've had a lot of business leaders here, entrepreneurs, and I think one thing that I think everyone has said is about your team. Absolutely. And you're right, because you can't do it alone, especially, and I've spoken to a lot of people on here, and if you want to scale your business, you really can't do it alone because you don't know everything. So you need people that are specialized in other areas to help you. So it is the ability to gather a good team that actually makes you a good leader, and not your ability to do. Yeah, so that is that's absolutely correct. Now,
I think that's why people struggle when they first start businesses, right? Because we go at it alone.
Yeah.
And we think, we're the ones that have to be the accountant. We're the ones that have to be the salesperson. We're the ones that have to deliver the service or the product, or we have to manufacture it or whatever. And it's like, we're not good at any of those things necessarily. We may have one thing that we're really good at, but the rest of them we're not. And then the business suffers because we're limiting our opportunities based upon our own abilities.
Facts. Right, okay, now we're going to get into leadership then. You're a leader.
Okay. This is where I like to go.
I'm going to start with, what are the key leadership principles that have carried you through challenges across multiple industries as different as healthcare and logistics? What are those principles?
Yeah, so, I think about it through the lens of my current work. So I run teams that are operating in about 26 or 27 states today. And so you can only imagine the complexity of a logistics and healthcare business that's spread across that big of an area, right, in the U.S. Basically, it's from Denver down to Austin all the way east. And the first thing that comes to mind is integrity, because the one thing that you need to provide to people is that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, but you also need from them that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. And you can't spend a ton of time constantly checking in to see, hey, you said you were going to do this, is it done? You need to know that when they say, hey, I'm going to do this, that they're going to do it. They're going to do it to the best ability. The next thing that kind of comes to mind just as a leader in general is clarity of the vision. And in challenging times, like especially when you're restructuring and making changes and adapting, that's hard because sometimes people don't understand how those things work, still having the same vision in mind. And so the key to that working is you obviously have to communicate. And that's the third one, I think. I always laugh about communication, and for a couple of different reasons, but the primary one is because it's one of our core values as a company. And then after I think about how much we try to be good at it, but we're terrible at it, I say that it's an aspiration. It's an aspirational value. It's one that we want to be good at. It's one that we try to be good at. But as you know, there's so many modalities today.
Yeah.
Whether I can send out a video, I can get on a Teams chat, I can have a Teams call, I can send out an email, I can send out a text message, I can send out a WhatsApp message. I mean, there are just like so many modalities, and all of us like to be communicated in the way that we want to be communicated in. Now, I will tell you that as someone who tries to communicate in all these modalities, I'm like, just give me the communication. I'll take it in any way you can get it to me.
Yeah.
But for my staff, they have one way that they like to be communicated in, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's, how do you keep track of that? How do you effectively communicate in that modality?
Yeah. So you got to be flexible then with your methods.
Yes, and it's hard because that's not our primary communication strategy, right? It's not how we want to be communicated to. But we have to remember that these people have a lot of things going on. And even though we like to be burdened by all the challenges we have every day, like they have their own challenges and then they have their personal challenges on top. And so we need to do what we can to be as effective as we can for them.
Yeah, right. Okay, that takes me to the next question then, which is the fact that, you've emphasized building cultures of continuous improvement and advancement. What's the first step that leaders miss when trying to embed this mindset?
So this isn't true of everyone, but I'm just going to talk about myself here, and I'm going to globalize it. So my opinion is one of my biggest weaknesses is that I forget to listen. And it doesn't mean that I continue to forget to listen. I just want to talk, right? That's my natural reaction is somebody asks a question, I want to provide the answer. But I need to step back and I need to listen to what is actually being discussed. Because so often I take away that opportunity for somebody to really shine by being able to say, here's what I think. And guess what? They probably think the exact same thing I did. And the reason that they think that is because I hired them to answer that question.
Yeah.
And so often I want to get in, I want to dig in because I want them to know that I'm actively in the pool with them when things are going bad. And I forget to listen. I think that's probably my biggest issue that I have that I need to continue to work on.
Yeah. And it's important, isn't it? Because listening, like giving people that platform to give an opinion, even though it's something you have thought about from that strategic level, it makes them feel like it makes them feel heard. It gives them the confidence to sort of bring up more ideas, isn't it? Right?
Chucks, there are times where we think we get a question, we're like, yes, this is the question I was made for, right?
Yeah.
And we want to answer that question. And we need to be quiet and listen to what the others have to say.
Yeah.
That's so hard. As someone who's really proud of, their experiences and what's got them to here, like it's so hard to step back, but you need to let those people win. And that's how they win is they can contribute to what the team's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've thought, thinking back myself, most times when I've had to be asked, oh, what do you think? Or say something, or it just naturally gives you that confidence that, I'm part of the team. And I think it's a good thing. So guys, you guys have heard it from Christopher today. While building your teams, while organizing, while expanding, innovating, make sure that your team members are ahead. Carry everybody along. That is very, very necessary. Just moving on, that's going to take us to the next question, which is how do you lead organizations through seasons of change without losing momentum or morale? This is very important. How do you do this?
Yeah, so I'll tell you that in my experience, I just keep over communicating. I communicate and communicate and communicate and communicate until I'm blue in the face. And I'm like, I don't think I could say this one more time. And then I say it 10 more times. That's the way that I deal with it. The problem that we forget is that uncertainty creates anxiety and silence makes it worse. And so in a constantly evolving and never changing organization like the one that we work in, people operate to a drumbeat of communication. They don't want to just know the facts, right? They don't want to just know that this is what we have to do, or this is what we have to cut, or this is what we have to do different. They want to understand why and how that affects what we're trying to accomplish and how that fits into the vision for the organization as we move forward. And we got to keep reminding people, like for instance, this organization was started in 1991. Long before I was here. And if we continue to do what they did at the beginning, we only generate 1.2% of our revenue from the services that were offered at the beginning of this organization's life.
Wow.
And so we wouldn't exist as an organization. And so reminding people that evolution, it's not even a desire, it's a must. And so over communicating why that's important and reminding people why we have to change. There are so many of us that love change. I'm one of those crazy people. I love to see change. I love to see people take risks. I love to see people fail because they learn so much. They won't do it again and they'll move forward from there. But that's really hard for most of our staff. Most of our staff, they don't want to see any of that.
Yeah.
They just want to come to work, know exactly what they're doing, be comfortable that they're really good at it, and move on through the day.
Yeah. And that's not really what the job market is about now, isn't it? With AI and all these things now, you need to do a bit more. You need to show some level of innovation and that you're looking for ways to optimize your tasks. So yeah, that is really huge and important. Well, let's get into finance and private equity for a moment. You've been on both sides. You've been on the operating side and the investment side of things. How do you evaluate private equity opportunities differently as a leader versus an investor? Is there a difference in approach?
For sure. So as an investor, I'm scanning for financial signals, scalability, and potential returns, right? That's my core focus is what do I put in? What do I get back out? What does that exit look like? How soon does it happen? What's the return? Am I satisfied? What's the risk? Probably is another good one. When you're an operator, you're really focused on, can the team execute the vision? What are the hidden differentiators? What are things that they don't see that have value that they don't recognize, that you can subsequently bring out of them as a team after you've made the investment? And so I think that's the difference is, when you're looking for investments, you're looking for returns. When you're operating an organization, as a leader of an organization, it's how do we differentiate ourselves? Who do we have on the team that can really step up and in a meaningful way make something more valuable than it is today?
Yeah.
And how do we scale it?
Yeah. I mean, which really, at the end of the day, is the same thing. Somehow, some parts of it are same. You're looking for profitability, you're looking for, however, strategies are different and a few things are different. Yeah, just to...
because as an investor, remember, we're just sitting on the outside, right? We're just hoping that this team has what they need in order to carry it. When you're the leader of that organization, you've really got to make all the pieces of the puzzle fit together while managing all the risks and the day-to-day activities that can derail the focus on what your ultimate outcome is. So there's a lot of overlap for sure. And we talk about the exact same things. I would just argue that we talk about the same things in different ways. Is that fair?
Moving on to the next point. These days, you hear a lot of organizations laying off here, laying off this. There's estimations that this kind of job will not be in the market anymore in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, right? And I'm sure there are some common mistakes that companies make when they're trying to streamline. Because that's essentially what it is. When you hear these layoffs, companies are trying to streamline operations, prepare for investment or whatever. What are some of those common mistakes that companies make in these processes?
So I think we make mistakes on two sides of the people equation, and that I'm going to talk about. Number one is we overexpand, thinking that we're going to get greater returns on those investments than we actually get. And number two, cash flow kills companies. And so after you realize that you're not getting the expanse of value that you anticipated from your growth, now we're chasing efficiency and we're cutting people. We're cutting costs for the purposes of survival a lot of times. And unfortunately, it's really difficult to know which costs to cut and which ones not to cut. And so a lot of times we make mistakes on both sides. We invest in people that we think will deliver more value than what they do. And unfortunately, when we get into a situation where we're not getting the returns or we're not getting the cash flow that we need from the organization, then we react equally egregiously on the other side and we cut those costs, unfortunately, too fast usually, and forget about really the underlying business model. And those becomes short-term issues, right? So the short-term issue is you expand hoping to have long-term value, but then you end up having to do short-term cuts because you have to survive if you don't have the cash flow that you need.
Yeah.
At least that's from my perspective. I think those are two of the biggest problems.
Biggest reasons, yeah. So one of it is cash flow, for cash flow reasons, right? To be able to have, it's difficult. It's difficult, and
I think if I were to provide advice around that, my biggest thing would be to do more step changes in the expansion process. So not to put so much pressure on your current cash flows, and then use those returns that you're getting from those initial investments to then double down and make more investments instead of making all the investments at once and then having a whole lot of pressure on those people to deliver. But, in private equity businesses, you only have 10 to 12 years to grow out. And so you need to make some big changes, unfortunately, at times. And when those changes don't provide the returns that you're hoping for, in order to save the investment, you also have to make alternative cuts.
Some radical cuts, yeah. Honestly, I always find it very, sometimes unhuman, but it's difficult.
There's no question about that. And I think part of the problem is, right, is you think about how we're interviewing hundreds of people and we're picking a few, right? And so in every instance, there's going to be a percentage of those decisions that are bad, but we don't ever build that into our model. So we never think about, we're probably going to hire John, who's not only not good at what he does, but he's extremely disruptive and really doesn't add value to the organization. And then because we hired John and we're not delivering on the results that the team was expected to deliver, not only does John get affected, but other people get affected. And so unfortunately, because we're trying to make huge changes and get huge returns, sometimes it does become very inhuman. And it's not, I don't think that the intention of it, let me put it this way. I don't think people go into the scenario thinking of that as an intention, but just like you've kind of challenged me to think about my decisions with these questions, I can see how from the outside, some of my decisions would look at like I was completely cold-hearted, and that's absolutely not true.
Yeah.
But from the outside, it looks like, well, okay, you overexpanded your sales team and now you're making cuts back. And it's like, well, yeah, that's probably true, but it wasn't intended to be that way. It's just how it works sometimes.
Yeah. It's sad, but well, it is what it is, I guess,
Yeah.
I know these things are about individual cases. Also, a lot more organizations have some other reasons. They're not all for the same reasons. So just to be aware of that. Okay, just what financial or strategic signals tell you a company has real growth potential? Emphasis on real growth potential, not just short term or
So I really like to look and see their recurring revenue and the amount of attrition that comes from that same recurring revenue. So not in the sense of like, can they grow year over year, but in the sense of, are they losing like 1 or 2% of their customers every year, or are they losing like 12 to 15% of their customers every year? Both of those have equal opportunities to really scale, right? But if you're losing a high percentage of your revenue, if your turnover is diminishing every year and you're replacing it, the amount of inertia that has to go into that sales strategy is huge. Whereas if the growth is really, hey, we maintain like 99% of our customers and we grow like crazy, I mean, that's much more enjoyable for me because I feel like it says a little bit about the company's value that the customers feel like they're receiving comparative to what they're paying. If they constantly have turnover, I start to question about, okay, so is there some percentage of people that try this and then they don't feel like they actually got what they paid for? And so therefore they're willing to walk away from it at some point. Because you can always fix like the strategy of how you grow those revenues. But if you also have to fix the character of how the revenue is delivered, the character of the organization as a whole, like that's really hard at the same time as trying to scale a business. Because a lot of those potential clients you've already turned over, right? Like if you're constantly turning over people, then you say, hey, I'm in a niche business. A significant portion of my growth opportunity are also people that have to prove that I've fixed the character of the organization at the same time. And so I just think there's some risk there when you've got a lot of turnover.
So let's say a company had 1 million people, right, that buys their products, and they generate out of it, they generate $1 billion, right, revenue from that 1 million people, different people. And then all of a sudden, about 50% of those people or 30% of those customers go away. But then one customer gives them the same amount of revenue, or let's say 800 million. So how do you judge that kind of scenario where you've lost literally 30% of individuals, but then you've gained one company that's going to give you 80 or 60% of the same revenue? How do you judge that kind of scenario?
So I'm just like everybody else, and I go, wow, I'm really excited about that customer, and I'm really nervous about that customer all at the same time. And so I'm going to really dig into that, right? I want to understand, like, why is it that this customer is so excited about us and about our product? But I'm also going to start to say, okay, so we have a concentration now in one customer that is huge. And so if they're willing to commit to a really long period of time, and this is something we think we can create other reoccurrences of, super excited. And I've run businesses where we've had customers that were 15, 17% of turnover.
Yeah.
And I've had accounts that were 25, 30% of gross profit. So it's not that I'm not willing to do those environments, but I will tell you, when they go hurt, oh man, does it hurt?
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to, okay, if I have this customer, like, what does that change in my business? What kind of investments do I need to make in order to take care of this customer appropriately? And then if they walk away, where does that leave us? Because if it really changes the dynamics where I'm adding a lot of administrative headcount, I'm adding a lot of sales headcount and things like that. Yeah. And then also remember too, when you have somebody that significant as a customer, in order to continue to grow with a high multiple, which is what private equity is looking for, year over year growth, usually significantly in it, over 10%, minimum 15%, ideally over 20%. If you just grew that huge amount in 1 year, it's really going to be hard to get 15 to 20% year over year going forward. And so just understanding what that means for us and what our potential is long term, and then how close to a transaction am I, because that's going to matter to the next buyer.
Yeah, that's important. And you're right, I've seen a lot of organizations literally crumble because of those business to business customers. Sometimes things happen, you realize that most of my revenue is coming from this person, and without them, literally, I'm running on, little or nothing. So that's
when you realize that the net change in your gross profit without that customer is bigger than your bottom line, you're in trouble, right? Like, I mean, that's just the reality of it. And we do end up, every business I've ever been with high concentrations, that's what I've always found, is that by the time that I scale the rest of the business, my net profit is less than their gross margin, in which case, if they go away, like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Okay. Let's get into mentorship and professional development, which is something you are also involved with.
Yeah.
You're a teacher as well. You've taught and mentored the next generation of business leaders. And from your experience, what kind of qualities do you see in young professionals who go on to excel?
I think they're just like your listeners, man. They're people who want to learn, because you can show up prepared, you can ask thoughtful questions, you can do the follow through, you have some curiosity, and you have discipline. Like, I don't think it gets much better than that. And so really it revolves around a desire to learn. And let me just put it to you this way, and I'm going to steal this from somebody. I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was Dave Ramsey in the US. I don't know. He's like, you take me to a car show, I can walk around all day and never get tired. But you take me to the shopping mall and my neck hurts up to my head within 5 minutes of walking in that door. And it's the same thing on learning. If it's something we want to learn, man, it's so easy to learn it. If it's something we don't want to learn, we don't want to know how to do it, it is so painful. Guess what? It's the same is true for the company, right? If I bring you in and I'm like, I really need you to learn this, and you're like, I don't want to learn that. Guess what? You're not going to learn it, or it's going to take you years to learn it. Whereas if you have a desire to really be a sponge and to absorb all this stuff, what you'll find out is you'll start to figure out how all the things you do impact everything else that we're doing. And so you're like, hey, if we pull this lever, that's going to hurt them over there. I need to give them a heads up that I'm planning to pull this lever. In the benefit of the organization, still win, but I need to give them a heads up. Those are the things that make somebody invaluable on a team.
Guys, you've heard it here from Mr. Chris. You got to make yourself invaluable in a team. Gotta have, and that's what we do here. We're curious, and that literally mirroring the name of the podcast. This is the Curious Tycoon Podcast. This is where entrepreneurs, aspiring young people who are just starting up, we wanna grow, we wanna learn, we wanna improve on the knowledge that we have. Right. What role does mentorship? By the way, I have another video on mentorship. Guys, check that video out. I'm gonna put it in the description. Mentorship is something that is huge. What role does it play in your career? What role has mentorship played in your career, and how do you continue that cycle with the leaders you're developing now?
So let me first just say that, in my opinion, the reason that mentorship is so invaluable to us is it eliminates our own limiting beliefs of ourselves, of how the world works, of how transactions work. I mean, when I was a kid in a small farm town of 800 people, I had no idea that I would eventually sell a business to private equity, let alone turn around and run that business after private equity has acquired it, and to be partners alongside some massive amounts of funds. I mean, my current private equity partner has around $1.2 billion under management today. I mean, just massive amounts of funds. So mentorship is what got me to where I am. It's somebody along the way. I could even list off those people. You know, I go back to like my first time that I was in a GM training program or a leader training program. I had a gentleman that said, I think you could be the GM of this company. I'm like 23 years old. I don't think so. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to train you. And so he put me into a program. And he's like, the reason that I'm going to start you in sales is because every person before you that I put in this program has failed at sales, and it's always the last one. So I'm going to start you there. So I started in sales. I blew the doors off. Then the company sold to the current management team, which I wasn't a part of. And that was fine. So I went and found another job. 6 months later, the plant manager comes to me and he says, hey, the senior vice president of finance is coming in here to interview a gentleman for the controller position of which you've been doing for the last 6 months. I think you should interview. I said, I don't know how to do that job. Because you've been doing it for 6 months. You absolutely know how to do that job. He goes, I'm going to take you to dinner tonight and I'm going to help you to answer the questions that he's going to ask of you in order to get this position. You need to put your hat in the ring to get this job. I said, okay, fine. So I went to dinner. He prepped me for all these questions. He didn't have to do any of that stuff. And all he was doing was confirming my own knowledge that I had of what I was doing. Guess what? I got the job. I got the job over a guy that had been there 17 years, partially because the plant manager talked to the senior vice president. I could hear him from my office as he was walking out, and he said, if you don't hire this kid, you're an idiot. And 18 months later, I was running a $1.5 billion division. From operations finance perspective, I had one plant that was shipping 50 semi-truckloads of frozen vegetables every single day. I mean, the opportunities are endless, and it's all these little steps along the way. But it's because somebody had a belief in me that I was who I was, because they didn't like whisper, knowledge into my ear or anything like that. They just provided me with confidence that I could do this work. And so that's what I do for my team. I think a good leader wants what's best for their team members.
Yeah.
Not for the benefit of the organization, but for the benefit of the team member, right? And so, like, I just had a guy that I brought in about a year ago. Super sharp kid. I was just so thrilled that he came and joined us. Amazing development through that year. And he left me. And I'm so happy that he did, because he's doing what he wants to do for whatever benefit that he wants to provide to his family. And he was so thankful for what he got while he was here. And I don't know that that's true, but I'm sure glad he was here. And I'm glad he did what he made the changes that he made and developed himself. And now he's found another role that is better for him, that allowed him to continue to grow. And so, that's really what mentorship is all about, in my opinion.
Yeah, very, very, very important. I think, mentorship, sometimes really that's what, it makes a lot of difference, doesn't it? Because it means that someone is taking you under their wing, coaching you, showing you the way, believing in you. I think, very important. So guys, check out that video as well, why you need a mentor. Check out that video. I'm going to put it at the end of this video. Very, very revealing, especially if you're young. You need one. You need someone to guide you, someone that has walked through the path that you are trying to walk through. Great. Right. Okay. So now, as we're approaching home stretch now, for young executives then, aspiring to the C-suite, what's the most underrated skill they should start building today?
So as I thought about this, I really thought about the uniqueness of the way that we do business today. So many of us aren't in the same room anymore. We're in teams or in some sort of an application. So I think communication is probably the most important skill to be effective. But along with that comes a few caveats. So a lot of intentionality. Probably, Chucks, you and I probably had the benefit of people seeing us because we were in the same room, because we were contributing to an in-person meeting. That's not the truth, the way that works today.
Yeah.
I mean, I deal with people in a different state or in a different country all the time. So, communication and intentionality about what it is that I need them to hear from me when I'm talking to them, right? Because they need to know that I'm relevant to them. They need to know what skills that I bring to them that can help them. And they need to hear it from their perspective. So like when I'm trying to deliver value, and I always encourage people when they're trying to build themselves in their career, they need to think about how to make their boss really look good. And so what I think about is, what are the skills that I'm bringing to you that I need to communicate to you that will help you look really good so that when you move up, you'll drag me along with you? Because that's what usually happens, is that my boss, the one that hired me over that guy that had been there for 17 years, got promoted. And he got promoted into a really high-level organization after us buying $1.5 billion business. And he's like, who's the guy that made me look good along the way? It was the young kid that showed up and did amazing things with an organization that they didn't expect, but caused them to not have to focus on us. They could focus on the problems. We took care of the problems in my plants. And so I think it's coming to the table with intentional communication, doing it effectively, proving your value, and then hoping that that person sees enough value in you to drag you through the organization as they move, because that's really what you need. And so you have to be invaluable to them, but the only way you're going to do that is to effectively communicate what you bring to them and how you're going to bring it to them.
Yeah. Very, very nice. Right, okay. We're just going to get on to some more interesting questions as we round up, now. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the podcast today.
This is great.
Very eye-opening. It's been, especially at the end, we're going to have, guys, check out some of the links in the description of this video to where you find Chris. But now you've revolutionized processes in healthcare, logistics, and finance. But if you weren't in business, right, what completely different career would you have chosen apart from business?
Let me give you this caveat. First of all, business is in my blood, and I don't think that's going to change. But with the caveat that you pigeonholed me, and so I had to make a decision. Right? I think I would be a golf coach. The reason is I think the game teaches you patience, it teaches you strategy, and how to recover from setbacks and to make good decisions over and over and over again. And if you think about it, I'm a terrible golfer, just being transparent here. But most of that comes from getting into a situation where I'm like, okay, I'm behind the game. So instead of just hitting the shot that I want to hit, I hit a shot thinking that I'm going to recover the failure that I just had in the stroke before. And so being consistent, making the right decisions over and over again. But I do want to caveat this answer in that, I would encourage the listeners to think differently about retirement than what the global statement of retirement looks like. And here's why. The way that I think differently about retirement isn't that I want to exit business. It's just that I want to be in business in a way that doesn't tie me to a desk every day. And I think that's what I consider retirement. But as far as from an investment perspective, from a finance perspective, from a board perspective, I love keeping my mind going all the time.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a game, and it's exciting. And there's nothing like getting paid for your expertise. It's really a difference. So, if you think about it, figure out a way to get on a bank board, figure out a way to get on a small startup board or a startup organization where you can really add a lot of value. You create a lot of value for yourself, and it keeps you in the game.
Yeah, lovely. Right, okay. I mean, these ones are a bit fun questions just to end before you ask me, because normally I like my guests to ask me questions. So sure. This is the last one I'm going to ask before we round up. Has there been any funny episode? Is there any funny... What's the most unexpected thing that's happened to you in a boardroom?
Well, I would like to say no. I think everybody would like to say no to this question, but of course something has always happened. So I was on a board meeting. It was very tense. We were like making some really hard decisions, complex decisions, and I felt like I was the outlier. So like I'm the one creating a lot of the tension. About that time, I'm taking the call from my house because I was working from home that particular day. I had to either go pick up my daughter or take her somewhere right after school, and so I didn't have the time to be able to traverse from my office to my house because about 30 minutes. And my cat jumps up on the table, knocks over my coffee into my computer, and closes my computer screen all at the same time, and I get disconnected. And everybody, of course, saw this happen, right? They saw the cat coming up onto the table and the coffee cup coming into my computer and my computer eventually dying. So all they could imagine was, oh my gosh, the coffee spilled into the computer's dead. He's not going to be able to get back on this meeting. And I recover quickly. I had my iPad there because I had it with my notes. So I immediately dialed in on my iPad. And there was so much laughter. It just changed the whole scheme of the day. And everybody realized, okay, yes, he was being a pain in the butt and he was fighting hard for what he believed in. But he's just as human as the rest of us, and it's all good. And everybody could come from a different perspective. And we laughed for probably 10 minutes about it, and then we moved on. And I'm sure you had to be there. The listeners were probably like, oh, that was not that exciting or funny, but it was at the moment because it was super tense. And when those happen, like, you'll appreciate them. I think that the result turned out way better than it would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, what caused that cat to jump up there at that moment? You know, all praises to God there, I'm guessing, but, you know, whatever.
Awesome. Right. You know, honestly, this has been a powerful conversation, Chris. You know, you seem to me, there was the last question before ask me, you know, do you have any questions for me before I ask you my final, you know, there's a little observation I had about you, and I'll give you the chance.
Yeah, Chucks, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, what did we talk about that you feel like, knowing your listeners as well as you do, that I didn't give enough detail around to be able to help them to follow what I was saying? Or is there anything you want me to expound upon before we move on that your listeners would say, I think I understood what he was saying, but man, if he would just talk about that for like an extra 30 seconds, I really would have gotten a better perspective.
Honestly, you know, most of the things we wanted to sort of discuss today, I think you did break down a lot. You know, the first one, which are key leadership principles, which is something I ask so many leaders, and there is consistency there with a lot of other very successful high net worth people that we've had on this channel. But if there's any, you know, let's maybe a little bit about mentorship. And I think you talked about it, but if you can sort of break it down a bit more, the relevance, the importance, how people can find mentors, maybe that might help a bit more. Yeah.
So let me give your listeners some perspective from my seat. I would say that between 40 and 60% of the success of an organization is revolving around investing in my team. And the other portion of that is around recruiting the right members to then fill seats on that team. Those are my two biggest priorities as a CEO of a company and as a material investor in this company. It is so important. Take the time to be willing to mentor those people who are below you, and take the time to ask people who are above you. The one thing that I hear the most in my podcast from people that I don't even feel like I have the right to interview are, you'll never believe the person that asked me to be their mentor. And I was so caught off guard that I said, of course. And so you think that all these people aren't willing to take their time and to mentor you. And that is such a limiting belief. It's the purpose that we use mentorship for, is to eliminate those limiting beliefs. I will tell you that if you have this mind that, oh my gosh, if this person mentored me, I could quadruple my opportunities in my life, then pick somebody higher. Pick somebody that would do it 10 times or 20 times or 100 times. Because what you're thinking is those people have so many people asking them that they can't possibly say yes. But what I'm telling you is, if you make it a full-time job to get in contact with those people, eventually you'll get in contact with them. And they may say no. But if you do that 20 times, one of those people will say yes. And that will make such a difference in your life and in your kid's life and in your kid's life. I can't even explain it to you. Yeah. And then the other thing that I'll tell you is, when you're trying to find a job, it is not about the money. The money will come with your ability to expand your horizons and your ability to take on responsibility. Find positions where you can find people 3 and 4 levels above you that are willing to invest in you. If you're joining a company and you don't have a conversation with the CEO or the senior vice president or the vice president, I don't care what level you're at, if you don't have an interview with somebody in that group, you're joining the wrong company. Because those people want you to know what's important to them, and they want you to know that you have access to them, and they want you to succeed.
Right. Honestly, that is, yeah, guys, I'm gonna obviously make that into a short. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. I think you gave another perspective. You didn't just buttress on that mentorship, but you also gave ideas on how people can find their dream mentor. And I do agree with you. Yeah, if you keep knocking on the door, eventually that door is going to open. So that, again, consistency of whatever you want to do. Thank you so much for that for that perspective. I had to make notes there because of the way you talked about that.
I think to me it's very important. As you mentioned, I have a podcast around how it connects with leadership. I think it affects how we think about people. I think it affects how we think about priorities. Like for instance, yes, would I love people to work 24/7? Yes, everybody that employs anyone would love them to work 20. But we all know that if you don't invest in your families, if you don't invest in your faith, if you don't invest in yourself, you're not bringing your best self to the team. And so we're not gonna have the opportunity. And so I think, if anything, I would just remind people to live their faith within their organizations. You don't have to shout it from the mountaintop, but don't lose your faith when you go to work. Don't lose who you are and what's important to you, because it's so imperative to what you're doing. And don't forget that it affects you, and don't forget to have conversation about it, how it affects you, because you might change how somebody else perceives or thinks about their own faith. And so I just implore you to be true to yourself and to be true to your religion, whatever religion that is. I don't judge that. I just want you to bring your whole self. I'll be the guy that is thankful for you when you enter Ramadan or whatever religious belief that you have. I don't judge based upon religion because it's so important to me. I would just continue to encourage you to find mentors. I would shoot for the stars. I would tell you that the people that you think would tell you yes, those people are busy. They're at lower levels and they'll tell you no. Reach for the stars. You'll find people that will agree to be your mentor. It doesn't take a ton of time and it doesn't take a ton of investment on either part. It's so worth it. God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Chucks. If there's anything I can do to help any of your listeners, reach out to me. I'm here.